This is part 6 of my series on my Engage model railway project. Previous parts provided an intro to the project and my background with the railways and covered initial setup of the baseboard, selection and laying of tracks, some initial scenic items including Metcalfe and ratio kits, a tunnel built from foam sheets and a review of my LMS and LNER rolling stock. This part returns to scenic items for the layout. Building a hill from foam sheets and vegetating it, building a Metcalfe card kit of signal boxes, and building and painting a P&D Marsh white metal kit of a 1931 Bedford bus. So first to the foam hill. I had always intended to put one or two hills in the middle of the layout. One of the possible hills got superseded as I ended up using that area for an expanded rail yard and ultimately a turntable and loco sheds, to come in a future video, but I went ahead with a hill in the central area. First I taped together some sheets of paper and made a template of the intended footprint of the hill. Next I took the paper template and used it to mark out the shape on sheets of light white insulating foam. I had to use 2 sheets of foam for a layer as the sheets I had were only about 15 inches wide, so I labelled the 2 sides so I wouldn't get them confused. I cut the pieces out using a hot knife, sort of like a cheap soldering iron, but taking an X-Acto blade rather than a soldering tip. I tried to cut on an angle to create a taper. Here the first 2 pieces are being tried on the layout board. Next I marked and cut another layer. In hindsight, given that I didn't have a vast amount of foam and anyhow didn't want the hill to be too high, I should probably have made this second layer a bit smaller. For a third layer I just put a foam sheet on top of the first 2 layers and marked something out freehand. And again the same for a 4th layer. So here are the 4 layers being tried on the layout. And I decided to add a small 5th layer. At this point I arranged all the layers and marked round each on the layer below to fix my arrangement. Sorry, I rather skipped a bit with the pictures here. I glued the layers together with white glue and then glued some thinnish brown felt type material I had down over the whole thing, also with white glue, and then trimmed round the edges. Then I sprinkled various colours of woodland scenics, fine and coarse turf over the whole thing, just by taking spoonfuls in a plastic spoon and moving the spoon over the hill, tapping it gently to drop small amounts of grass flock. Finally I added some bits of woodland scenics clump vegetation and sprayed the whole thing with scenic cement to more or less fix it. I did all this on a large piece of cardboard in the bathroom to facilitate cleanup and whatever, because it was obviously potentially a bit of a messy process. Here's another view. I'm afraid I'm quite new to this whole landscaping thing, so I'm not really much good at it. Here's another view across the hill to the main station. It actually looks better like this. I'm afraid the edges don't work very well, but perhaps when I get round to adding bushes and trees that will improve things. But I really don't want to get into that until I'm fairly sure that I'm not going to make more changes to the basic structure of the layout and the actual track plan and things, and I have still been doing some work on that. I have bought quite a range of trees ready for this. Here's another view from the other side. I've tried to blend the edges of the hill a bit more with woodland scenics turf and scenic cement. Here's a bird's eye view of the hill after its initial fitting. Next I did a little extension to the road system, putting in a turning to the south side of the board and another level crossing. Those are Pico crossing gates, but the brown pieces they're sitting on came from the ratio crossing kit. The setup's a bit odd, I guess, with the inner track being so close to the outer double line, and the inner line is not currently protected by gates, so probably this needs further revision at some point. Here's another view of the south side of the hill and the new crossing. I see there's still a power feeder cable near the tunnel portal that hasn't been put through the board. I've been trying to clean up the cables by drilling holes through the board and passing them through. Next I built the Metcalfe card kit signal box set. This set was entirely up to the high standards of the previous Metcalfe kits I've worked with. I must say I'm very satisfied with the Metcalfe kits. The set actually includes not only the large and small signal boxes, but also a plate layer's hut and a small lamp shed. Note the outside toilet attached to the wall of the large signal box at the top of the stairs. The green wedge at the right is not actually part of the finished buildings. It's a jig provided to help you put together the steps. You do have to assemble the steps to these boxes by gluing each individual step between the two stringers, the sides of the staircase, but this is made quite feasible by the jig which Metcalfe provide, which holds the two stringers in place, parallel and the correct distance apart, so you can focus on placing each step carefully with tweezers. The same jig can be used for both boxes, as it has separate holes for the long and short stringers. Because of this kind of thought on the part of Metcalfe, I was able to successfully and neatly assemble the steps to these boxes, in considerable contrast to my experience with the ratio plastic signal box kit. See part 4 of this series. Here you can see the small Metcalfe box, together with the plate layer's hut and the lampshade, in place at the west end of the main station. In the foreground, and you can see more of my attempts to edge the hill and my inspection saloon on the line. See part 5 of this series for details on that. And here's a more general view of the main station, with a large Metcalfe box on the left. The large Metcalfe box on the left, and the hill in the foreground. Next I turn my attention to the only P&D Marsh white metal vehicle kit that I bought. I did buy several pre-painted P&D Marsh white metal vehicles, and those seemed to be a good deal, as they weren't terrifically much more expensive than the kits, and they're certainly assembled and painted to a higher standard than I can achieve. Of course, if you are really good at assembling and painting these little things, you might be better to buy the kits and enjoy your own results. Anyway, here are the main bits of the 1931 Bedford bus kit, being pre-painted before initial assembly. Since obviously it won't be possible to paint the interior after assembly, what they're on is the instructions that come with the kit. See the dime for scale in the middle. The bits at the bottom right are the wheels. I wasn't quite sure how much metal I was supposed to remove from these. Generally I had to remove quite a bit of metal from most of the pieces, as the casting seemed to have resulted in quite a lot of flash. Here's the bus after my initial attempt at assembly. The diagram under the bus is all that comes in the way of instructions, and I didn't find it entirely clear in indicating how the bits were supposed to go together, so I struggled rather. I was also gluing together with CA glue, superglue, which isn't very forgiving. And here's the bus after my attempt to paint it. It does at least look quite like an old bus. Here's a view from the side. I guess I didn't manage to get all the flash out of the window holes. Also, the front seems to sit too high or the back too low. I don't know quite how that came about. As I say, I wasn't too clear how the parts were supposed to go together. Finally, here's the bus sitting at the crossing. Hopefully in a view like this it looks okay. And as mentioned, I do have a number of pre-painted P&D Marsh vehicles that will end up joining this bus on the roads of the layout. In fact, the roads will end up quite busy for a country setting. Still quite a bit more to come, and I haven't even got to the point of adding scenic details such as figures, vehicles and trees to the layout, other than this one bus. No need to rush, better to enjoy the project. I think that next in this video series I'll deal with naming the main station and making the backing scene for it, seen here. And then the following part will deal with installing and weathering a Kato motorized turntable, which was quite a project in itself.